It's all for real. I'm telling you just how I feel. You know, iCarly. Here I come. Here I come. Um, I'll probably start most of these videos with an apology, just to those because I'm gonna be reiterating some things that we talked about in class about each topic. So for those of you who were in class, it might get a little redundant, but hey, what I say is important enough to hear twice. I mean, you could look at it that way too. Um, so, yeah, to those people who were in class, you um, spoiler alert? No, yeah, well, whatever. Um, iCarly and shows of its ilk, right? You guys, you guys hit on most of the vibes that I was going for. More of you latched onto the whole representation of law enforcement and the police than I thought. Because I didn't even think about that. I mean, a little bit I thought about it, but that's interesting in and of itself. That was where a lot of you went. That's what stuck out to you was that these two cops, one, were completely abusing their authority, taking over the apartment, spanking civilians, um, and their behavior was peculiar, I would argue, not to code, probably. Um, so that, I think, I get it, but remember, like, you're viewing it with a 2021 lens, which I think has something to do with it, right? Um, it's we have the luxury of sort of looking back and picking things apart like this. Um, I do think they were portrayed that way for a reason, but it's more than I don't think it was a criticism um, of the police at all. I think if a show were doing that on Nickelodeon in the 2000s, like that would be so radical. I think their behavior and uh, and, and protocol or whatever is to a different point, different to make a different point, and which is another that you guys kind of latched onto, and that I talked about in class, which is like this idea that kids don't need adults. Adults are fucking idiots, basically, which is probably true. Like, yeah, adults are fucking idiots, but so are kids. Like, like if we're gonna have this fight, let's be real about it. But one thing I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like that was the title of the thing, and asking some questions like, why is every authority figure, every adult, every parent, sort of portrayed as this bumbling idiot? I mean, it's the single thing that runs consistently through this episode, if not most episodes of iCarly, and again, shows of its ilk, like shows of this era, which include Ant Farm, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, That's So Raven, Victorious, Zoe 101, all that, Sam and Cat. I mean, I can't even, literally, it would take me a half-hour video to list them all. Of course, Drake and Josh, The Amanda Show. Yeah, I'm consulting my list over here. Thundermans. Thundermans. Uh, Keenan and Kel. I mean, just the list never ends. So, why is that? Like, that was my big question. Why does that happen? Why? Like, these adults are props in these kids' lives, right? They're there to for amusement, to be mocked, to be ridiculed. I mean, think about this episode. They're Sam Sam and iCarly and Freddie are literally just mocking strangers on the street at the beginning of the episode, just looking out down on the street and making fun of adults. Like the woman with green hair sucks on a pacifier, the guy running who needs a bra, the guy who eats whatever the fuck it was. Right? They're idiots. Right? Why is that? The cops, that's why the cops are the way they are. They're they're unprofessional, they're morons, and they're there for ridicule. Spencer, like Spencer is, he is a child. He is a man child, basically, right? And he's the one in charge. He's the voice of reason. Sam's mom is, I think she's seen a handful of times. I think she's actually played by Jane Lynch a handful of times throughout the series, but they talk about her all the time and that she's this shitty mom, like she's in prison all the time or whatever, like something like hilarious like that. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is Freddie's mom, who is a complete overprotective psychopath. And that's hilarious, right? Like that's to be made fun of. So every instance that you see of an authority figure or an adult or a parent or a proxy parent, Spencer, they're made to look foolish and to establish this hierarchy where the kids are more astute, intelligent, funny, interesting than the adults. So the question I asked on Friday, and I will ask now, why? Where does that come from? And I, just in reading through your comments, I came to some interesting, if not frightening, conclusions that I'll talk about in a minute. So anyway, I'll go through just some of your comments. You guys hit on most of it. Like a lot of you talked about the randomness, and like, yeah, that's such a your generation thing. I think it's funny too. I wish I had it. That just sort of appreciation of the random. But it's chaotic, and it doesn't need to be at the expense of. I don't know. I don't understand the desire to have this power shift where kids rule the world and parents can suck it. Like I just don't get it because it's bullshit and it doesn't work. Like in reality, kids are idiots. Like period. Like, and they need adults. You need adults. You do. You might think, oh fuck you, old man, but you need adults because you are an idiot. Until you're probably like 27, you're a moron. Like a complete moron. You haven't lived, you have no experience, you haven't seen anything. Like you don't know anything. So to accelerate this process and intimate that these 13-year-old kids do know everything, they have seen everything, they're wise beyond their years and witty and clever and accomplished and all these kinds of things, it's ridiculous. And again, where does that come from? Now my take is it comes from a generation of people, of kids who never heard that they sucked. Period. Like the trophy generation of everyone's amazing, everyone gets a trophy, everyone's special. The entitlement generation, which is kind of yours. I have a son that's your age. He's junior in college. So, and he's still a fucking idiot. And I, so I know how you guys grew up for the most part. And that's I I fought tooth and nail to not have my kid be that kid, to be fucking Carly. And just like this idea that like fuck you, I'm the fucking man just because I exist. Like that, no. That's not how it happens, but there is a generation of people, kids, who are now, your age, who believe that because why wouldn't they? They haven't heard otherwise. And their television programming has sort of told them that adults don't know anything. They're just here to amuse me and for me to make fun of. Like that's just it's a danger. It's dangerous. It's a slippery slope that you don't really want to go down. And you know, eh, I think a lot of it starts with not just iCarly, just the whole thing, the whole Nickelodeon Disney Channel movement towards this kind of show. The fact that there's so many, I think, makes this an undeniable, an unignorable discussion that needs to be had, right? Um, so Mike, Mike Urbina made this comment about, um, and this is what I was just talking about. You watch iCarly as a kid, it makes you feel as important as adults or authority figures. And I'm like, my response to that was, yeah, it does. That is dumb because you're not, right? Like this just sort of hubris that grows out of having that. Like if you live in a home where you were told you're awesome and you're special and all that stuff, like that's great. I'm all about self worth. But if you have living there and then you're having iCarly and all these sort of sentiments bounced back at you from the TV, like that's a fucking dangerous cocktail to be consuming. Um, in terms of these distorted views of what it's like to be a person. Um, so yeah, it might make you feel like as a kid, like you're, just as important as an adult, but you're not though. um, so, and again, I don't blame you guys. I think it was astute of you to latch onto the police stuff. Especially, it shows that you're kind of paying attention to the world today, which is good. It's always nice to be able to look back and apply stuff like that. The whole police thing is completely whitewashed. A couple of you guys mentioned it, right? Like the cops are there being morons and they're chasing it's just white people problems, of course. And I don't expect you don't expect them to be on a stakeout hunting, you know, busting up a crack house or something on iCarly. Like, duh, they had to pacify it some way. Um, but looking for DVDs, stakeout, come on, like that's. I don't think it was intentional, but I could see in hindsight looking back and being like, this is not this is not a good look for the for the police representation. Um, it's somewhat, in many cases, that's what you guys were sort of pointing out. It trivializes police work and law enforcement and things like that when that's what you're seeing. And if you're a kid watching it, like if that's your only exposure to it, it probably was white kids in the suburbs watching iCarly thinking, oh, that's what the cops are like. They're hilarious, you know, and that's not good either, right? Um, Melissa, oh, that's what Melissa, that's your comment was towards that idea. Um, Arlie, I wrote, you're not overanalyzing it. Trust me, you're not. None of you are. So if you ever feel like I'm thinking into this way too much. Like, you're on the right track, typically, with this kind of stuff. Because people don't think about it. People don't think about iCarly. Like, why would you think about it in this context? Like, that's part of the beauty of this course and other courses like it, is you get to think about this stuff. You get to overthink this stuff. And that's where the good stuff happens. Um, so I think Arlie was talking about, let me see. I think she was talking about the Dan Schneider stuff that we touched on briefly. Um, yeah, we touched on briefly in class, and I have more on that as this video continues. Um, so in class, I kept going back to the theme song. I'm like, listen to the theme song and what it says. Like, the chorus is "Leave it all to me." Like, what 13-year-old psychopath is screaming at the top of their lungs? Don't fucking worry about it. Leave it all to me. I know. You'll see. Somehow the world will change for me and be so wonderful. Like, even that is fucking crazy. Think about it. Talk about entitlement. Somehow the world will change for me. It won't have anything to do with me. Just somehow everything will happen perfectly for me and line up and be so wonderful. Just leave it all to me. I don't need parents or adults or police or authority or anything like that. Just leave it all to me. I'm 13. I'm a 13-year-old douche. It's all good, right? So the theme song is, think about that. Like, you're a kid, you're 10, 11, 12 watching iCarly, and I do it. I do it. If iCarly's on, I will scream the theme song along with it. Leave it all to me, leave it all to me, leave it all to me. Imagine a kid at 10 hearing that over and over again, thinking, leave it all to me, I got it. Eventually, that can, doesn't always, but it can just sort of seep in and be like, oh, fuck you, Dad. Leave it all to me. Like, that's where it ends up sometimes. And here's the thing, you could say I'm insane, but in 2021, has our culture not leaned more towards this leave it all to me, fuck you, Dad stuff? Like, parental child relationships are a lot different than when I was a kid, which is fine in a lot of cases, but it's not in some. Like, respect for parents and authority from children is kind of uh, a dying aesthetic, and that just kind of sucks. Like, again, this whole like hubris thing, where like I said this in class too. Like, I heard how much I sucked like most days until I went to college, and even then, it was like a couple times a week. Like, some kids grow up never hearing that. It's humbling. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you from screaming "Leave it all to me" right at the top of your lungs. Um, Now, you don't need to, right? Like anything, it can you can go too far with it. It has for a lot of people, but um, the theme song, just like, if you weren't convinced of this whole thing, just look at the theme song and just it's it's a sociopath singing, right? If you think about it, um, I don't know why it's been on at my house because my youngest Cash is watching it, and every time I'm like, oh. So I love to just watch it and just pick it up and be like, oh, right, because the cops just are just eating the food out of the fridge, right? That's cool. He's like, he goes, the web show iCarly is not funny, but the real show is funny. He keeps saying that. I'm like, eat shit. Uh, so more towards this Dan Schneider thing. I don't know how many of you know about the Dan Schneider thing. Um, he's actually on a sitcom when I was a kid, head of the class, and he got into the production business, and he had his production company, Schneider's Bakery, and they made all these shows, like all of them, for Nickelodeon for years. Like all those shows I listed, Victorious, iCarly, Zoe 101, all that, Sam and Cat, Drake and Josh, Amanda Show, Thundermans, Keenan and Kel, among Henry Danger, among others, were his production company, and he oversaw everything. And it's come out that he isn't really the best dude, right? Um, a lot of just shady shit with young stars and starlets, and you know, pedophilia, and just creepy stuff, and the foot fetish. Like, all this stuff has come out. He's never been charged with anything, but one of his associates went to prison for it. It's just just all that shit that you don't want to hear. Um, and it came up in class, like, well, hey, like, because my question still was, why do these shows want to eliminate parents? Like, what's the end game, sort of thing? And I can't remember who asked the question in class, but like, he's like, aren't they adults writing these shows? So aren't they responsible for it, not the generation of kids watching and participating? And I was like, well, I think most of the shows are from Dan Schneider. And that, I didn't even realize it was that many of the shows that we're talking about that were under his umbrella. And the more I think about it, I'm like, of course, a an alleged pedophile is going to fantasize about a world without parents, right? A world without authority to come in and bust him for his thing. I know this is getting way too dark for an iCarly discussion, but I think it's there's something there, right? Um, like, of course he doesn't want parents around, you know, in this, if these are these fantasies played out for him, with the foot, all the foot stuff, and even this episode I showed you, the spanking, right? What? Um, it just casts this dark shadow over what I kind of thought was this kind of cute, innocent theme that I saw developing, right? It's just like, ooh, what if it's because of, what if it's way more sort of insidious than what I thought it was? The more I think about it, the more it's hard to ignore that, sadly. Um, so back to the question from class, like, me, it could have been adults creating this world for themselves, right? Um, in the most just sort of despicable way. Um, Michaela and Jordan both mentioned this idea that iCarly kind of spawned, like, virality, like going viral. Like, because if you ask, even like, my daughter's 18, like, if you asked her, like, oh, what's on your bucket list, she would say something like, oh, I'd love to go viral for any reason, like, at all. And she's a product of this iCarly generation, where it's like they were on the web and everybody fucking fell over backwards over about their web show that was the dumbest thing ever. But like, that really kind of was the start of the whole YouTube creators, and that being a thing and being a job and making money doing it, and just this obsession with going viral. So that's kind of interesting to track that back there. Um, and then Kelly's story about her friend who came over to the United States when she was 17. This is more towards Americanization, I think, and what we talked about with Friends. Um, that iCarly was her only window into what high school was like in America, and you're just like, woof, like, come on, dude, that's rough. That's rude awakening is a nice way to put it. So I thought that was interesting in that it sort of covers this iCarly thing, but goes back to our discussion on Americanization and Friends and like like the world's perception of us through our television, right? Um, Peter, your sister loved iCarly? Okay, got it. Your sister loved it, not you. Right. It's okay, man. It's a great show at what it does, right? Like that's I mean that's people forget that kind of stuff. Like people love to combine things that shouldn't compare things that shouldn't be compared. Like when High School Musical came out, everyone's like, oh, anyone who thought they were cool was like, oh, it's so stupid, it's so dumb, it's terrible. Like, well, compared to what? Compared to The Godfather? Yeah, it's a horrible movie. But why would you compare it to The Godfather? Like, compare it to other teen high school musicals? It's the best one. It's far and away the best one. So same with same with iCarly. Like of these tween shows that sort of consumed a generation. iCarly's the best easily. Um, there aren't many others I can even stomach. Um, so just to reiterate a bunch of stuff. I've been as random and all over the place as iCarly, which I guess is fitting for this video. Um, but I mentioned the adult characters, like every single one, right? Spencer, Freddie's mom, Sam's mom is mentioned in this episode. The people on the street, the cops, even the guy who works at the video store, drugstore, whatever that is, who played Booger in Revenge of the Nerds. Like he's an idiot making pirate movies, like his own pirate movies. Like, he's penned as this complete moron, right? Um, so they really double down, triple down on this. If you're over the if you're over the age of 30, right, you're a complete joke, and to be not just a joke to like laugh at, but to be dismissed and put down and um, and sort of lorded over as you know as less than. Um, Parents, adults, authority, always props in the kids' lives. Like you think about Drake and Josh, right? Like they're the parents. Like if they're in an episode, they're being duped by the the kids who are always smarter than them, or they're just sort of bumbling idiots who don't realize the stupid shenanigans that are going on right in front of them when it's so blatantly obvious, right? Um, I mean, this idea that it's wrapped up in the trophy thing, trophy culture, the entitlement generation, like all of that. It just seems to be fueling this kind of sentiment. Like it's so ridiculous that like Ant Farm is like sort of the pinnacle where it's like we're so amazing and special and talented that we need a school for ourselves to be away from all the fucking idiots in the world, right? Um, the Sweet Life with Zach and Cody, like really, like the mom works, she's a singer at the hotel, barely around. The dad rolls in every once in a while in his fucking tour bus. He's a douche, doesn't give a shit about those two idiots. I'm sorry. And Mosby he's he's the butt of every single joke, right? I mean, he's a complete bumbling idiot. And these two, I don't know, 13-year-old boys who look like girls. They look like 13-year-old girls. Um, but I know what you're saying. But one's smart and one's just like cool. I get it. And I always go back to this, and I mentioned this in class too. Like when I grew up, Beavis and Butthead. I don't know if you know who they are. The animated show by Mike Judge was on MTV when I was in high school, came out and swept the nation in a very similar way. And basically, Beavis and Butthead are complete degenerates, and they are this cautionary tale. They are. This is what happens in a world without parents. They don't have any parents. I think their mom shows up maybe once in their entire existence. They're left to their own devices, and they sit and watch videos and make fun of them and eat nachos and make fun of people. And they're dumb and they're ignorant and they're troublemakers and they're just complete delinquents. Like that in the 90s, at least, 90s, 80s, and beyond was like world without parents and authority and respect for it. This is what you end up with. Two complete wastes of space. So what happened between 1992 and iCarly, Beavis and Butthead and iCarly, that changed that so drastically? Like the world without parents is this Xanadu where everything is awesome, everything is cool when you're part of a team. And it began with, a parentless world is a is a douchebag's hellscape, basically a douchebag hellscape. That's something to think about. The last thing about this episode that I'll say is, the whole tampering with the ongoing police investigation, like that's what it leads to. This hubris that I was talking about before. We're so awesome, we can do the policeman's job better than them. Like we'll figure it out and completely break the law, I guess, like completely overstepping their bounds because in this world they don't have bounds. Like so I think that's something that we underestimate in this culture now. It's like I made the statement. I think kids want guidance, they want direction, they want structure in some level. Like of course you're always balancing that with your desire to be independent and your freedom. Like you're always in that struggle, but I think just being listless is not a goal of anybody, right? Um, so that's to those who argue, oh, it's just for kids and kids want to think about this world. I'm like, I don't agree. They don't want to think about this kind of world where do whatever you want. It's all gonna work out. Leave it all to me. Somehow the world will change for me and be so wonderful. Wait.